Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We will just begin in a couple of minutes, inshallah ta'ala. I hope you all can hear me, inshallah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh once again. So, after yesterday's session on unrestrained glances, I received a few questions that were about looking at the non-mahram out of necessity, and questions about whether it's okay to look and have eye contact with a person at work, as a student, or in a setting where it may be considered offensive if you don't look at them. And the answers were from both brothers and sisters. So the answer, of course, is going to address both of the questions from the brothers and sisters. The hadith where Rasulullah said, as I mentioned yesterday, فَالْعِنَانِ زِنَاهُمُ النَّظَرِ, يعني the adultery of the eye is the nazar, the look. So the question of what kind of look? Does it have to be a lustful look? Does it have to be where the other person is attractive, where the other person incites some kind of evil feelings or thoughts within you? Immorality. If the other person tempts you, it's only a look. Is it only a look that is tempting, that can lead to something immoral? The answer, as I had touched upon yesterday, is that whether the other is attractive or not, young or old, poor or rich, educated or not so, covered enough or not, one should always keep their gaze low, for both brothers and sisters. And as I mentioned yesterday through the Nur, the 30th ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the men first, and the 31st then the women. Before even the women are told to lower their gaze, or the commandment of khimar, the head covering, before the women are addressed, the men are told to lower their gaze, and then the women are told to lower their gaze in the other matters. So if this is the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has reached us in this manner, then we need to reflect upon this. However, now the question is, if a person is working in a professional environment, what do you do then? Because if you don't keep an eye contact, some people may consider you as not confident enough. Some people may consider you as not being truthful enough. Others may consider you as, just not professional. So what do you do then? You see, Just because you have to lower your gaze does not mean you have to look away also. You can look straight up, just keep the sight low. You know what I mean? You can look straight up. You know, you can have a confident posture, but keep the eyes low. Because if somebody's standing right in front of you, talking to you of an important matter, nothing haram, and you look away and your face is away, now that's kind of offensive and weird also. So if you are at work, as I mentioned yesterday, as long as that your general character is positive, truthful, respectful, this is not something that people will make a big deal out of for a long time. I mean, once they get to know how professional you are otherwise, I mean, the fact that you're always there at work on time, you always meet the deadlines, that you are never disrespectful to anyone, that you don't backbite or gossip at work, that you are just, you follow all the protocols, all the policies of wherever you're working or studying or whatever it is. Once they get to know that, once they get to know these other kind aspects of your character, the well mannerisms, the generosity of yours, and just the goodness of you, this is not something they're going to make a big deal out of. And we have many, many, many testimonies of very professional, successful people who are also fearful of Allah, who say that yes, we didn't come under the peer pressure, but we knew that we had to be on our toes about our other matters of akhlaq, character. And then this doesn't become a problem. Even if you followed these so-called, etiquette of dunya, as they say, the worldly etiquette, instead of the etiquette that is set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, creator of this dunya. But if your mannerism is generally just messed up, if you're not considered as truthful, reliable, professional in other matters, then you keeping an eye contact is not going to gain you any honor or anything, any reward anyway. So just because in the professional setting, it may be strange that a person who is speaking to you, who is of an opposite gender, out of respect for you, even though looking, like their body postures towards you, the face is towards you, but their sight, their gaze is low. You're not going to make a big deal out of it if they are very respectful, very polite, very kind, very professional, and all the other matters. So what do you think? Why would anyone else make a big deal out of it? Maybe in the first meeting, and they don't know you, maybe the second or third. But then the question came, what about interviews? When you are taking or giving interviews, that's the first impression and could be last impression. Well, as the Rasulullah ﷺ said, whatever befalls you was not meant to miss you, and whatever missed you was not meant to befall you. What makes you think that if you go against the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the etiquette that is taught by his Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there'll be any khair or barakah, even if you got that job or that promotion or that, got admission to that institute or whatever. At the end, nothing happens without the will of Allah. And everything else is just part of this dunya, like a dream, a phase, a delusion. Success is what is success in the sight of Allah. And as I mentioned in the very beginning of these sessions of purification of soul, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already told us in the Quran that in His sight, the one who's successful is the one who comes to Him with qalb salim, with a sound heart. While unrestrained glances, these are the poisons to the heart. Some people even, ask, but what if I'm not attracted to this other person I'm looking at? It doesn't matter. Or that I'm not going to do anything, I'm not tempted. Now, this looks like a person is very confident about themselves. Isn't that where we fall, slip, where we're confident? I'm not going to do nothing. I'm not going to say nothing. It doesn't matter whether you think you were tempted or not. It doesn't matter. And do you really think, in fact, I can tell you as a family lawyer, when we have spouses coming, whether it's male or female, it doesn't matter, and they complain of their spouse cheating on them, and sometimes one of their questions is, but really, genuinely, that person, if even was attractive, I could say, okay, maybe, but that person is not even attractive. What is wrong? And subhanAllah, it's really nothing to do with attraction. Even if the person was not attracted to the one they're looking, you're just not supposed to look at the opposite gender unless it's necessity. And the only case where it is real necessity are these. First of all, remember that the first glance is forgiven, as long as you don't prolong the first glance. For instance, if somebody's talking, how would you know it's the same person you've spoken to? If, for instance, somebody comes from you to speak to you at work, in the marketplace, someone has visited, or you have been someone's place, this or that, how would you know next time it's the same person? How can you recognize? You haven't looked at them. So the first glance is okay, but then just don't prolong that look and do not take the second glance. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter whether you're male or female. It doesn't really matter. But now, okay, I know I see a couple of more questions here. I'm going to get to them, inshallah. You see, if the one you're looking at, if that person is absolutely unattractive, if that person is even old or poor or whatever, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to keep our sight low without putting those conditions in there. Did not Rasulullah tell two of the mothers of believers, when there was a blind man in front of them who cannot see them, Rasulullah telling them, but you too can see him. So it really doesn't matter to be on the safe side. Just do not look unless it's necessary. Now, what is necessary? That's one. In the case of, in a medical case, for instance, even though, by the way, a lot of people don't know about this, and the ones who know, very few of them even practice it. But even when you go to a doctor, you're supposed to look for the one of your gender if they're specialized in it. If you don't find the one, a Muslim who specialized in that particular matter that you are going to get a check on, if you don't have of someone who specialized Muslim of the same gender, then only you can go to the other. But at least you should strive to look for the one, even if you are going to a dentist. First, try to look for the one. If you're a male, try to look for a male Muslim. If you are female, try to look at a female Muslim who's specialized. It is only when you don't find one who specializes in the same matter and is the same gender as you, only then. Now, in that situation, for instance, they may have to look at you. They may have to examine you. So that would be under necessity. As far as the protocol was followed, you did strive to find someone specializing in your own gender. Now, even in that, there has to be Muslim, preferably. Only if you don't find a Muslim, then non-Muslim. Right? It's for both genders, by the way. You're supposed to look for specialized someone who's of the same gender and also Muslim. If you don't find that, then you go for someone specialized of another gender or religion. Okay. In the court of law, for instance, if someone has to identify someone, a criminal, or at the police station, or you have to give testimony, and in certain situations you have to look at, that's okay. As far as it's, it fulfills the purpose till that much. Or the first glance, as I said, right? In all the other situations, that's why females are supposed to be there for the females, and the males are supposed to be for the males. So that you don't have to go through this struggle, but it will be someone who I have to look at, otherwise this, otherwise that. So the safest thing is to not even put yourself in that position in the first place. And there are people who, out of taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He has promised us, and the gist of the ayah is that whoever trusts Him, has tawakkul on Him, He will make ways for them from places they had not even imagined. So there are people who have a lot of opportunities, but they choose which opportunity they will avail out of taqwa of Allah, being conscious of Allah, being mindful of Allah. And they know that even though worldly wise certain so-and-so opportunity is better for me, but then they, choose what is better inside of Allah, where they don't have to place themselves in a position where they have to struggle. You know what I mean? So if you have a choice not to put yourself at a place, in an environment, at a job, etc., where you have to struggle more in observing the laws of Allah, do that. But even if you do have to struggle, remember, each and every time you do struggle, that's a hasana, that's a good deed. Each and every time that you're tried, when you're tested, when you have to struggle, when you have to overlook the peer pressure, the etiquette in the side of creation rather than the creator, when you have to put that aside, when you have to ignore what people may think or say or do, and hence you only do what is pleasing to Allah, persistently being patient. Know that you are constantly in an act of worship. So that struggle also sometimes becomes a blessing in disguise, not a burden. But it's the way you look at it. It depends on your perspective, right? Okay, there was another question that I received yesterday. Let me just quickly answer that. It's a long answer, inshallah ta'ala. If within this year I get to have a detailed session on it, then I'll be doing it, inshallah, after Shawwal. But to summarize the answer, the question was basically, how do we speak to, what are the etiquette of speaking to the opposite gender at work, for instance, where, there's no other way out kind of thing, and somebody's working also out of need or whatever. Okay, I'm going to just mention in points without going into detail of it. The first is the conversation with the opposite gender should be only limited to what is necessary. To restrict it to the matter at hand. Not going to other topics, not talking too much. Just imagine, how would a Sahabiya or a Sahabi speak if they were here in this situation? How would you talk? In what tone? How much? And what would you say if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was right here next to you? How would you talk, in what tone? And what would you say to the opposite gender if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was next to you? Watching, hearing. Don't we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Basir? He sees everything all the time, public or private. Don't we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a-Sami', who hears everything, public or private? So even if, someone once said that the litmus test is, imagine for instance, if you're a female, imagine if your father was there, your brother was there, would you speak in the same manner, kind of thing? For a brother, for instance, imagine if your wife was there, would you speak in the same manner, kind of a thing? But even in those situations, it could be different for everyone, because some people are not respectful towards their loved ones, some people are not sensitive toward their loved ones, and some people just have too liberal, family members also. So that could still be different. So I wouldn't say that's the litmus test. I think the litmus test simply, if you imagine that you can see Allah, and if you can't know that He can see you, it's the same kind of khushu' that is needed in salah. When you're standing before Him in dunya. So when you are busy with preoccupied with other matters of dunya, think of you standing before Allah, the inevitable standing before Allah on the Day of Judgment. And that should be the litmus test. And if you can't think like that, imagine Rasulullah being there next to you. Would you do the same? If you can't think like that, imagine can you imagine you being a dweller of Jannah, labeled as one, observed by the angels, and just all the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This person is the dweller of Jannah. And then this is how you speak, or this tone you speak in, or this is what you say. Okay, so one thing is only limit yourself to, when you're speaking to the opposite gender, to what is necessary, the matter at hand. Okay. The second thing is, do not joke or laugh. Okay. Be graceful. Be dignified. You don't have to be rude. That's another extreme. And that's not from the Sunnah of Rasulullah or the way of the Sahaba, Sahabiyah. They were not rude. Okay, so being religious does not mean you become rude. That's another extreme. As messed up. Be graceful, but speak in a regular tone, the way you speak to your own sibling or parent, it's a regular tone. So, but even though you don't have to soften your voice or the words, and by the way, it's true for both male and female. But that does not mean you become rude. That's one thing. And at the same time, do not joke and laugh. Try to avoid that. And it also includes nowadays when you're chatting or in the chat group, etc., not to use these emoticons when you're talking specifically to a opposite gender. Okay, emojis or whatever you call them. Another point is, do not, like, you know how some people, when they are speaking, some people are used to it, so they don't think twice about it, but there's certain gestures, movements, of face and hands, or etc., etc. Be careful about your movements. You know, do not embellish your speech. Basically, do not go to extreme in embellishing your speech. Right. So, in the adab of talking to the opposite gender, 1, necessary conversation. Number 2, not joking and laughing. Number 3, do not soften your voice or words. Speak in a regular tone, ordinary tone, as you would to anyone else. Number 4, do not, um, make such movements, etc., or anything that certain skills in communication a person may have, where, they can beautify their speech or communication, and try to avoid that. Also, of course, as we're saying, talking about the look, do not stare. After the first look down. You don't have to move away your face as if you're ignoring them, because that's rude and that's offensive. That can be misunderstood. But you can look at them, like your body posture, like the should be towards them, but it's just that keep your eyes low. So you don't have to keep your head low, but your eyes low, the sight low, okay? The gaze has to be lowered, right? Okay, yeah, there is another point also. Now, is there only one rule as to looking at the opposite gender, especially whether you're watching them on TV, on YouTube, you're watching them, or whether it's direct? Okay. If you are talking to somebody out of necessity, it is out of necessity, you're working with them or studying with them or whatever, and you have no desire towards them, so it is necessity, but without desire. So there are 2 views on it. There are 2 views. One of the views of Abu Hanifa rahimullah and Imam Malik rahimullah is that, and it's also one of the views of the 2 views of Imam Shafi'i rahimullah, but it is not the conclusive view of his. They say that in certain situations, you can look at the opposite gender if there's no fear of temptation, even if there is no necessity or desire. And they gave the example of Ayesha radhiyallahu anha in a hadith al-Bukhari and Muslim, where she radhiyallahu anha said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam screened me with his robe all the while I was watching the Ethiopians playing with their spears when I was a young girl at that time. So they weren't looking at her though, but this view holds that means that even though there was no necessity of her watching it, the Ethiopian men, playing with the spears and dancing, really not dancing, but playing with the spears. But there are a couple of views about this, but the fact that she was looking at them and Solomon did not prohibit, in fact, helped her, but he did cover her, so no one sees her, but she sees them. So does it mean that if a person is watching someone like on a gadget, TV, cell phone, laptop, etc., would that be allowed unless what you're watching is haram? So of course, if you're watching something haram, that's haram, right? You can do you cannot do something Islamically if what you're doing is un-Islamic. and vice versa. So that's one thing. First of all, they couldn't see her. Secondly, she was a young girl. She was very, very young at that time. Thirdly, it was at a different time than when those ayat came. All right. There are many explanations of it. But if you do follow this opinion, yes, there's a difference of opinion. It's a fiqhi matter. But the other view, which is the view of Imam Ahmad rahimullah, also one of the two views of Imam Shafi rahimullah, and that is it is forbidden. And they said that in that case, Ayesha was a very, very young person. Like she was a child basically. And it wasn't like communication between the two, right? They couldn't see her at all, but she was a child, you know. And then third, they also mentioned that this is before these ayat were revealed, and Allah knows best. Okay. Now, and the hadith of Rasulullah saying about the glance also came later, they say. And they also, in addition to this explanation of that hadith, also gives the ayah of Surah Nur 30, 31 both as evidence, but also hadith of Rasulullah as evidence. And what is that hadith? The hadith is reported by Salama radiallahu anha. And in this hadith, Salama radiallahu anha said that when she was with the Rasulullah, and also Ma'munah radiallahu anha was there, the son of Ibn Maktoum, Abdullah ibn Maktoum, came. And Rasulullah told them to screen themselves from him. Now we know that the wives of Rasulullah have special cases. Anyway, they are the ones who, after him, could not marry anyone. That does not apply to the rest of the women, believing women. They could not marry anyone else after. So there are certain things exclusive to them, according to the majority opinion. And I follow that, and Allah knows best. But in this particular case, when both of them, يعني Salama, as well as also the other mother believer, Maimuna, when both of them, Salama and Maimuna, when both of them said, but Ya Rasulullah, he's a blind man. He can neither see us nor recognize us. So what did Rasulullah say? And remember, these are not regular women. And they're not just Sahabiyat. These are the mother of believers. Yet Rasulullah said to them, when they said, but he's blind. Still Rasulullah said, but both of you are not blind. You both can see him. And we also know when the Sahaba used to, after Rasulullah ask Ayesha questions, that it's not even a matter of how much she was covered. They still had a screen in between. Like a screen in between, because so it's not one-to-one conversation, you know, even though then again, the majority opinion says that the case of mother believers is special. I mean, none of the other believing women are prohibited from not marrying after, you know, their husband passes away. Anyway, Allah knows best. But the point is that there are two opinions on this. The second opinion does not allow it. Allah knows best. I would say, considering this and considering what some of my teachers had discussed with us, is the fact that it's better to be on the safe side for protection of your nafs and the other. One shouldn't be so confident about their own nafs or that of the other, because we all have the qareen shaitan with us, and we also have weak nafs. Okay, because there's too many questions, and we have to end the session. We have another session coming up. So, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to try to have these. Let me quickly read them. If it's something that needs longer answer, I'll save it for tomorrow. How should we educate communication with brothers-in-law, especially? Okay, this one, brother-in-laws one, I have to have a separate session. I read somewhere that at the time of a business transaction, there is a need, there's allowed to look at the face, but nowadays we have other face identification. That doesn't apply anymore. I mean, business transaction, I don't think there's a need in that sense. But remember, even if you have to have the need, it's not that you can't have the first look. You don't know who you're talking to. The first look is okay. You know what to do when the other person behaves casually, talking in a joking way. You have to set a precedent. Once people get to know, like if you don't respond, they say takes two to tango, or do haath se taali bajti, or whatever, however you want to put it appropriately. If one person keeps joking and laughing and tries to be casual with you, but you don't reciprocate, how long would they continue? Put yourself out of the situation, excuse yourself. Don't have to be rude, but you just go silent, leave the place, or you don't even have to be in such a situation in the first place. Don't hang out casually with them, going out for lunch, and even if the whole staff is going, whatever, or in college, university, sitting in the with your classmates in the common room, or with your colleagues in the staff room, etc. Like, just try to avoid them in the first place. But if you are in that situation anyway, even in the office with others around, just don't reciprocate or change the topic. Because once you allow it, even with one person, then it's difficult to then change people's approach towards you, attitude towards you next time. If someone creates a practice and gather in simplified manner, then should respond in the same manner. If someone used to crack jokes in gathering, no, you don't have to respond in the same manner. If I understood your question. Okay. I think right now we'll end the session and the rest will continue tomorrow. I'm going to take more questions on this, so this is absolutely clear. Even though I didn't mean to go into so much detail of this right now, because the communication with the etiquette of communicating with the opposite gender in different case scenarios is a separate series that I have to do under the topic of hijab, with different opinions and everything, and with the strongest opinion, strongest evidence being concluded on. So till then, jazakumullah khairan. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.